berjuang jujur berkarya tanpa pernah meragukan kemampuan pada kita. Sungguh
Selamat datang di gedung Selamat Riyadi, Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta dengan bangga menjadi tuan rumah Lomba Debat Indonesia tahun 2025. Ajang yang mempertemukan para pemikir muda terbaik dari SMA seluruh Indonesia. Di sini, gagasan diuji, keberanian diuji, dan logika dipertajam. Kompetisi ini bukan hanya tentang menang, tetapi tentang bagaimana setiap peserta menyuarakan masa depan. Dari Sabang hingga Merauke, para delegasi hadir membawa semangat, budaya, dan harapan. Bersatu dalam satu panggung argumentasi terbesar untuk SMA di Indonesia. Selamat datang di Lomba Debat Indonesia 2025. Siapkan argumen terbaikmu, tunjukkan potensimu, dan jadilah generasi pemikir masa depan.
Cika, dia telah lulus SMA, tapi bingung mau kuliah di mana?
Jangan bingung, mari bergabung bersama kami di Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta.
UAJY memiliki 7 fakultas dan 14 program studi yang dapat jadi pilihan loh.
Jangan khawatir, UAJY menyediakan miliaran beasiswa yang bisa kamu dapatkan. Tentunya, terdapat program seleksi yang masih dibuka. Informasi lebih lanjut dapat mengunjungi situs pmb.uajy.ac.id. So, tunggu apa lagi?
Bakal nyesel loh kalau nggak daftar sekarang.
Welcome to Yogyakarta, the city of students. The city where a significant number of public and private schools and universities are located. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta, a private university established on September 27, 1965 by Yayasan Selamat Riyadi Yogyakarta.
Dalam bahasa Sanskerta, Atma berarti jiwa dan Jaya berarti unggul, sehingga Atmajaya berarti jiwa yang unggul. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta juga memiliki semboyan dalam bahasa Latin Serviens in Lumine Veritatis, yang artinya melayani dalam cahaya kebenaran.
The four core values upheld by UAJY are excellence, inclusivity, humanism, and integrity. Excellence implies equality or being better than others. Inclusivity means encompassing all social groups. Humanism, the definition, means to serve the common interest of fellow humans. Integrity means adherence to the moral and ethical principles, honesty, reliability, consistency in words and acts, and a sense of responsibility. UAJY supports diverse values, cultures, religions, races, ethnicities, and languages as a university with students from all across Indonesia. UAJY's diversity is an asset for further collaboration and synergy in preparing for a better future.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki 4 kampus yang terbagi menjadi Kampus 1, Gedung Santo Alfonsus. Kampus 2, Gedung Santo Thomas Aquinas. Kampus 3, Gedung Santo Bonaventura. Dan Kampus 4, Gedung Bunda Teresa. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki fakultas dengan berbagai program studi sarjana, program studi magister, dan international undergraduate program.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta is a second home for every individual to develop and share information, and a university with a high-quality education to attain unlimited aspirations and accomplishments. To achieve the goals, UAJY
Orders from both teams. From proposition, who is going to speak first? Okay. Okay, Jennifer, Phoebe, Sonia, Phoebe. Okay. Opposition? Kalika, Sean, Abian, Sean. Okay, cool. Okay, let's start this. Hi everyone, welcome to the second round of Lomba Debat Indonesia English category. My name is Ariel. I'll be chairing this round. I'm not going to be alone. Along with me, I have okay, and unfortunately the other judge will not be here, so it'll be just the both of us. But anytime in your speech, if you want to refer to the judges, please refer to the panel as a whole. Welcome to LDI. I think by now you will know that the speaking time is 8:15 maximum for substantive speakers, 4:15 maximum for reply speakers. There's a timer there. I'm not sure if there's another timer that is from here. LO? Ada timer lagi nggak yang buat dilihat Okay. I'll show you can see the timer here. I'll show it here as well, just in case, so you guys can see as well. Otherwise, since it seems that this room will be recorded or live streamed, throughout any time in your speech, when you are giving your speech, as well as when you're giving POIs, please use the mic so it's able to be heard from the live stream. Yeah. Let's start this round under the motion that reads, assuming feasibility, this House would allow countries to form Olympic coalitions. We call upon the first prop to begin today.
Am I audible? Okay. Note that right now, sports is often monopolized. For example, in basketball, there's an NBA dynasty where all the time it's always America that's always gonna win, or like for example in football, maybe like Ronaldo's gonna win all the time, or maybe that certain team is gonna win all the time. Note that sports needs to have a sort of equality, because monopolization creates like it's very boring. Secondly, then it makes it unfair for a lot of athletes with a different potential. Proud to propose my mechanism here. My model here is we allow countries to do coalition firstly we have like an organization or maybe a committee that allows this to happen, and it's a place where you can easily negotiate, for example, like the contracts and all those things. Secondly, then I feel like we should allow like athletes, for example, to choose which team they want to team up. So this is something that's very mutual. You negotiate with these like committees as like a third party, and you can negotiate with other countries to create a coalition with whatever countries you want, and like you can collaborate whatever, right? But in B, there's also conditions to this. For example, you have to fulfill like maybe a certain skill set, or maybe you have like a certain qualification that you have to go through to be qualified as an athlete, to keep it safe and maybe mutual, right? And then like and E, and then like lastly, then you're allowed to change in different sport. Like for example, if Indonesia, maybe in football, they want to collab with like Singapore, and in the other teams, they can maybe like collaborate in like different other sports and like different countries, right? Framing here is simple, is that in our current status quo, there's like a lot of disparity. For example, one team keeps winning, and secondly then, and like there's a lack of facility in like certain countries, for example, for example, maybe in Indonesia, like there's a lack of facility for like people or like athletes to get these funds or to get infrastructure so that they could practice well. Note that like, no, thank you. Note that like there's a lot of disparity, and I feel like the urgency here is simple, is that sportsmanship is going to go down when these people do not have a chance, and it's also going to cost less recognition on their side of the house. We want to provide and like push these countries to get recognition and to at least allow these athletes to get a chance to get these like money and all the sponsorship. Going into my argument then, number one, note that the athletes here is a very important actor here. Firstly, they're mostly neglected by government. For example, maybe government doesn't have really enough funds to fund this infrastructure, or secondly, then maybe they're just neglected because they're not seen as like someone important, or maybe they're just not seen because like the potential is not enough, right? Note that on our side of the house, when we allow these athletes to maybe negotiate with other countries and show like maybe their skill sets, for example, it at the very least gives them the choice to do so and gives them and allows them to get to play with their potential and to get a lot of recognition, right? So practically here is simple, that these athletes at the very least have the chance to choose whoever they want to play with. Like even if like their country doesn't get that access, they could at least access other infrastructure, right? But then going into my practical arguments then, firstly, it's about like the equality here, why we are going to solve disparity. Firstly, developing countries oftentimes lacks a lot of like infrastructure, or maybe like lacks coaches and all those stuff, right? Note that on our side of the house, it is going to be a lot more better, because firstly, when you collaborate with other countries, you're more likely to practice together or maybe be in the same place. Note that you're going to have maybe the same coaches, for example, or maybe you're going to have the same play with the same infrastructure. Therefore, when there's like collaboration, athletes from maybe smaller countries, for example, could access the infrastructure and gain up like have better skills, for example, so they could just upgrade their skills, something that maybe nationally you cannot get, right? And then like secondly, then you can maybe share the knowledge, or like all maybe have the same coaches, for example, so these athletes can up their potential. Then lastly, then on our side of the house, I think this is going to be a lot more better, because firstly, when we use a sort of collaboration and you maybe fund something together, you're going to have maybe this government's probably going to save more funds, because like you're collaborating and you're funding this together as like a country or an organization. Therefore, on our side of the house, a small benefit here is that maybe government can use these funds to maybe fund infrastructure, like maybe for example grassroots infrastructure. Like for example, this can incentivize them to do that more, simply because like they have to keep up with like the athletes and like focus on like other things. And then my second argument here is about like the identity. I think like opposition is going to bring like how this is going to cause an erosion in like sports nationality in countries, but we're going to prove to you why this is going to be a lot more better on our side of the house. Firstly, that it rises up fame for athletes. Note that when you collaborate two countries, it is going to bring a lot of like people, and it is going to bring a lot of engagement. For example, maybe if Singapore and Indonesia were to collab together, it's going to cause a lot of interesting like engagement or discourses, because it is very interesting that two countries are collaborating. This is going to cause a lot of recognition, simply because like two countries are like seeing like who are playing, for example, and seeing these athletes play. They're going to support this for like the country. Therefore, this is going to give you a lot of recognition and a lot of like clout, for example. Then no, thank you. And then like this is very important, right? Because note how like developing countries oftentimes don't have the chance to go up or to like climb up that sort of ladder. For example, just because like they keep losing towards like the bigger countries, for example. With this, at the very least, with collaborating, one, it is going to up like the win rate, simply because like there's a collaboration in terms of like infrastructure and athletes. Therefore, like for example, if two athletes are very good and they're playing together, there might be a bigger chance of you winning. Therefore, there's going to be a lot more recognition on our side of the house. It saves like the athletes' great potential, and it will allow like maybe better win rates on our side of the house. Secondly, then I feel like there's going to be international recognition. There's going to be more clout. Why is this so? I think an example that we can use is like physical Asia, for example, when like a lot of countries are competing with each other. Countries like Mongolia, who are not as well as known, are getting a lot of recognition simply because they compete in like an international competition, and they're like since like they're maybe being friends with other countries, therefore they get a lot of like things like sponsorships, for example, and a lot of things like sports, because like they engage a lot in those shows and they collaborate and all of those things. Therefore, on our side of the house, there's going to be like more clout and more recognition, simply because these athletes are probably going to have more fame when there's a lot of discourses and a lot of people talking about this new collaboration. It's going to bring in things like sponsorship, simply like because it is going to be so interesting. Secondly, then note that each athlete has their own characteristics. For example, their own predictability or like unpredictability, their personality, their own charisma. No, thank you. That on our side of the house, it is going to give these athletes a lot of like recognition. Add that with their charisma and like personality, is going to give them a lot of clout. Like for example, if you see that, for example, like Stephen Curry, since he has a very interesting personality, he's going to get more clout. Therefore, this applies the same for athletes who are collaborating and getting more recognition. This is going to shed a light to a lot of like countries. Like for example, maybe there's a good athlete in Indonesia. When they collaborate with Singapore, for example, people in Singapore or maybe other people are going to see that there's like an Indonesian athlete. Therefore, it is going to cause a lot of discourse and maybe even so like have there's going to be a sort of pathway, for example, so that these people can look into like this Indonesian athlete, and it could lead to other ways of like maybe Indonesian groups and all of those things, right? So practically, we give you a lot more recognition and like a lot more sponsorship, because I feel like the only income for athletes is from sponsorships and like wins. So on our side of the house, even if it's true that these athletes are losing, but at the very least they get a recognition and they could at least get sponsorship just from their personality or from like their potential, right? Lastly, then, if we want to talk about if like identity is going to be bad on our side of the house, at the very least, yeah, we have like those type of like personality, and like at the very least money, athletes can get this money. We think that with this money, like what the country is receiving and these athletes are receiving, they could simply invest this in like other infrastructure or like their practices. Therefore, there's going to be it is going to be a lot more better for them, simply because like now that these athletes are getting what they deserve and the things that they deserve, right? So on our side of the house, practically we win, because like firstly, then we can bring like identity. Now like our country is going to be a lot more famous, and now there's a lot of people who can recognize us. Secondly, then there's going to be more sponsorship. That means there's going to be more investors who are investing into these like athletes, for example. Therefore, there's going to be better infrastructure. There's going to be better care for these athletes, and it's going to be better. And thirdly, then our engagement is going to be better. Proud to propose.
We thank the first prop for that speech. To start the opposition side of the house, we call upon the first opposition speaker. Here.
Judge, to be honest, I don't really know that much about sports, but let's look at it this way. Imagine if this was applied to like NSDC and suddenly you had the ability to be able to form coalition between the provinces. This is where proposition's case completely falls, because they never given to you the analysis on why certain top countries will collaborate with other like random countries for reasons. What's most likely is that the top provinces or the top countries are going to collaborate with other top countries because the individuals who control the like funding towards these type of sports want them to constantly win, want them to constantly get medals, leaving others in the dust. This is where they completely miss the principle of sports, because note to you that sports is not about winning, because if that was the case, then that means that the football in Olympics should just be between Brazil and Argentina. Sports is about the feeling of the parades. It's about the feeling of being able to represent your country. It was understanding that every single individual in that country has put their trust in you to represent them. This is the exclusive benefit that they harm completely under their side of the house. Firstly then, on setups, I have 3 things here. One, note that this debate exists from the perspective of the Olympic Committee. If you actually see the slide, that this house would allow countries to form Olympic coalitions. Hence, if we can prove to you that the benefits to the Olympic committees, i.e. that we get better fairness in sports and we also get better entertainment in sports, which is a principle of sport, then we also win in the huge metrics. But second thing I want to talk about is note to you that this is also going to be based on political lines. This is why, for example, America and Russia and China are constantly competing on who has the most gold medals in the Olympics, exactly because why Olympics is such a household name. Everybody knows the Olympic Games, while not everybody's going to watch like the soccer cup or like all the other type of competitions. The third thing I want to talk about is that note that they cannot play best case in this, because note that in every single sport where coalitions are allowed or where it's allowed for you to take in other countries, there's going to be poaching happening, which is under their side of the house. They also have to contend with the very realistic scenario where, for example, countries like Argentina, which would be poached by the US exactly because they're part of one hegemony, but also Argentina is really, really good at football, which means that it's going to leave other countries to be unable to defend against this now newly overpowered coalition between Argentina and the US. the argument then on how we get the worst Olympic Games under their side of the house. What's the picturization here? I think there's two ways this can go. One, it means that good countries will collaborate with other good countries so they can dominate. Or two, it also means that I'm going to address their case on like, oh, these countries will collaborate with each other, these subpar countries, for example, like Indonesia and the Netherlands. Why then is my first proposition likely? I think 5 things, right? One, on the political polarization, exactly what I told you about like the context of the Russia, China, and US, it gives them a huge amount of like incentive for them to get the most medals possible in order to show their dominance. But two, it's also because it's the once in a lifetime opportunity, or once in a year, or like once in like 5 or 4 years opportunity, which you can never have this opportunity again to be able to show your dominance, where everybody's on their TV is going to be watching, everybody, even like people from all parts of the world, is going to see your team win. But third, noted that the standard of winning is different, and this is what they didn't manage to understand. Because noted that maybe for a country like Indonesia, then for us in Olympics is when we win one game, we're really, really happy, because maybe we're going to only win that game 20 years later. But for countries like America, they want to win the most medals possible, because they know that they already have the good people. They just want to like have more and more and more of that, because they want to have the best gold medal so they can like rank that up with China. Which is that the incentives between these countries are different. Which is even if they say like, that means like Indonesia won't have that much incentive to do this, America will still, because they want to get the most gold possible. But fourth, noted that even if the players or there are like other people that don't like it, noted that the power in the scenario holds onto the individuals who fund these Olympians towards this game, these individuals who fund the stadiums, these individuals who want to have results, these individuals who want to have the most medals possible. Because even if they say like, people will like react badly to this, that means there's going to be huge incentive then from the people actually in power to do this. But the last thing I want to talk about is noting that the fame, and it's not necessarily because they say like, people will be incentivized to not do this because of like fame. Know the individuals that even if LeBron James plays a game with another country in basketball, it doesn't mean that he stops being LeBron James. Because when you're already an athlete in these huge countries, you already have this huge amount of fame, which is that even if you don't have this amount of fame in the Olympics, you can gather it from other places. Comparatively, you're an athlete from Indonesia and you get overshadowed by Singaporean players and your one chance to go to the Olympics, that's fatal. What then is the impact to all of this? The first one is that it restricts the benefits to rich countries. Because at that point, that means that individuals in these countries, that means that the people who are going to win these games are going to be put on like US, Russia, or like Argentina, or like any of their hegemonies, and not actually the countries they want to support, the people who are actually vulnerable. But two, it also decreases the amount of player getting poached in every single individual country. You're most unlikely to get more Indonesian player poached by Indonesian government or trained by Indonesian government, simply because they know they can like build a coalition under their side of the house. How is it that at least better under our side of the house? I think it's 3 things. Right? One, that right now there exists like a lot of scholarships for these type of like sport individuals. Two, the existence of competitions like O2 SN in order to get like individuals to be able to go into these competitions to represent Indonesia. But 3, at the very least, we get lucky plays. Noting that the existence of, for example, like even if Indonesia has been like losing, that there's always going to be that maybe one lucky moment where we can win. That luck decreases significantly under their side of the house. The third thing I want to talk about is also it makes the sport less entertaining, because noting that people love underdogs. That's why people love stories like Cinderella. People love stories where these individuals who may not seem like they're going to win at the end of the day. Why is this likelihood still exist under our side of the house? I think it's 4 things. One, in so far that there are more players coming from every single country, it is much more likely for you to get like one genius or one person who's really, really good at playing that sport. But 2, the people have the motivation because they know that they're representing their country. They're the only way their country can win in the sport. But 3, also on the lucky player that I told you. But 4, in so far progress happens, in so far there's significantly more funding to O2SN right now than 10 years ago. That means that benefit is going to increase like significantly over the next few years. What then is the weighing in this debate? I think we win under 2 things. One, we win on the principle of sport in 2 ways. One, noting that sports is about the best player. That's true, but it's only when it's fair. Because in so far that there are different like circumstances encompassing Dutch and Indonesian players, that means you can never get that fairness. You can never get that true competitiveness under their side of the house. But 2, noting that motivation, their winning point, only exists when individuals in that country think they have a chance. When the Indonesian like people, when the Indonesian boys who like soccer, who even if like you have to go through like scholarship, know that they are the only hope to Indonesia, that is when you get the most motivation. This is when you get individuals who will like practice like 72 hours a week or more just to be able to make their country proud. But the second thing we win on then is on entertainment, because noting that in so far this is about the Olympics committee, then the worst thing for them is for this competition to become boring, is for this competition to be dominated by these certain countries. But even if their best case scenario is true, that what about it's just about like Indonesia and Dutch players and they just want to have fun, they don't want to actually like win these tournaments. We think it's bad in two ways. One, we've proven to you there's high likelihood that they don't win. We think that under their side of the house, they're going to start blaming each other. Because if you don't win, then what's the purpose of us like actually like not coaching our own players, not coaching our own players, and instead like getting these Dutch players onto them? Because you're also going to get like less of the sportsmanship that they get under their side of the house. And this also tackles their argument on fame, because in no way you're going to be able to get that fame. All you're going to have is like, oh, you were carried by these Dutch players, you were carried by the players from other countries. But two, even if they win, note to you that this is where my like context about higher standard matters, because maybe that this is going to be the first win that these individuals had in like 20 years, and this win is not even going to be about them. It's about going to be the other countries they were in coalition with. It's going to be like the strategicness of the Indonesian government and being able to pick who was able to carry them to the Olympics finals, which means that under their side of the house, they sacrifice the players for the country's own selfishness, which is why you must oppose.
We thank the first op for that speech. To continue the debate, we call upon the second prop. Here, here.
Cek.
The inequality that these vulnerable countries go through, the fact that they don't have the same equal chances of facilities, for example, is what prevents them to have recognition and actually get empowerment in Olympics. Because in the first place, we told you that these big countries, they monopolize Olympics, they always win and they get the most medals each year. When the opposition wants to come in and say that, it ruins the competitiveness of Olympics, then you need to prove under their side then why vulnerable actors will have the same chances to compete when in the first place they're already not standing on the same pedestal. But then, moving to my rebuttals then. Firstly, when they say that the worst case is when these big countries will just work together with big countries, I feel like this is not likely. Firstly, because in the first place, these big countries are already thriving on their own, so they don't really have an incentive to work with like other good countries, for example. And when we say so it is actually more riskier under their side for these big countries to work with other big countries, because it means you're gonna becoming like vulnerable with these countries, because in the process of you teaming up with other countries, you're gonna be training together. For example, you're gonna be opening up your strategy, and you're gonna be opening up your all of the things that you should keep secret, for example, in order for them to become better in the Olympics, for example. And we say that even in the best case, then they say that the characteristic is that they want to achieve more medals under their side. Even if that happens, we feel like it's not within the interest of these big countries, because it means they're gonna be undermining their own achievement. Because instead, when they could have like achieved these medals with themselves, they share it with another country's label, for example. And for example, so they don't want to exactly with the argument that they're just gonna be carried with these big countries, they're not gonna get the same recognition. But also, secondly, the fact that there's already like preventives like geopolitical tensions, for example, they're not just gonna be opting into just working together with these big countries, because the implication of these corporations is you're gonna be like you're gonna be coming like a closer diplomatic relation, for example, with these countries. So they're not gonna be like constantly with these big countries, especially with the rivalry that is happening under in the status quo. But also, secondly, the fact that we told you that the mechanism with these coalitions, there's going to be committees supervising these contracts, for example, right? Because exactly the principles that we want to uphold is we want to uphold fairness and like the equal chances for countries competing in the Olympics. So therefore, we're not, there are preventives to not just allow these coalitions to happen if like these big countries want to work together, because it's just gonna make the Olympics even more unfair. But also, lastly, the fact that if these coalitions even happen in the first place, there's gonna be public backlash, for example, because you see like how in like the Olympics it's just gonna be dominated by two countries, then people can just opting into the boycotts, and this is why the committees wouldn't want that, because they're just gonna be losing revenue when Olympics has a big revenue coming from the tourists, for example.
Even in the worst case, then even in the worst case, if this is gonna have like some kind of probability, at least under our side, we give you the chances for these vulnerable actors then to work together and at least have the chance to compete and the hope so they can then get even more leverage in these Olympics and even more support regarding infrastructure and also funding. But also secondly, then regarding like players that are getting poached, I feel like firstly these are already preventives when like these contracts are like made, then there's gonna be an equal split of like those teams, for example. But also secondly, even if that happens in the worst case, at least we give them the chance to win. At least they can get an experience in the progress. Even if they get carried then by these big countries, at the very least they're gonna get the recognition because Indonesia is also in the label of these big countries. And therefore, when they already have this experience in the in the first place, that is the prerequisite for these countries and these industries in the sport, for example, can progress even more in the further, because we give them the chance to recognize and like get these access to good facilities and good training, for example. That is what they're not providing to these vulnerable countries. But also like lastly, regarding like competitiveness, we told you that this is not really something that is important. Why is the purpose of like, okay, Olympics is supposed to be an individual country in the first place? It's much more important when you only constantly undermine these vulnerable countries, when you don't give them the same chances. They're just gonna be even more demotivated when it's only the big countries competing in the Olympics in the first place. We actually, so in the first place, the principles of us giving fairness and also equal chances for these vulnerable countries is what outweighs then the competitiveness nature of Olympics. I'll take the POI. I feel like in the first place, it's not within the interest of China to do that because there's someone that is authoritarian and they only like uphold their own value. But even if that happens, we told you there's already preventive measures from the committee, and I think there's only in the extreme cases. Opposition also needs to engage then, where vulnerable actors can drive under their side, because that is the most vulnerable actor we're talking in this debate. But moving on to my issue then, regarding like principles. Why is it important if we, for us to give these chances for vulnerable countries in the first place? The premise here is simple. Olympics matters a lot for a country because the fact that people come together and it's a communal celebration of like celebrating their own identity, right? The reason why under our side will fulfill principles that is good for empowering these countries is because firstly, the principle of fairness. Because we told you there's already a disparity of resources, right? The fact that Indonesia does not really have a lot of experiences or precedences of like achievements in basketball, for example, and you're expecting them to win fairly and like have a good morale when they're going against US in Olympics, we say not so. Because the prerequisite for these people, like watchers and viewers from like Indonesia, for example, to enjoy Olympics is they already have a hope that, oh, maybe I have a chance. And we give them the chance to believe in their own country when they can't work together with other countries like similar level, like for example, Singapore and Malaysia. This is why, and like the disparity of resources is something that is out of control of these countries. Like the fact that birth lottery exists and the fact that it is out of their control, that their economic is not as advanced as USA, for example. That is why we give them the leverage and we give them the leverage and the chance to, at the very least, can work together with other people so they can get more support for the national teams. But also secondly, regarding empowerment, because then under our side they can work together with other countries, right? Then people are gonna have more hope and more hope because they're gonna have larger probability to compete in the Olympics because they can they can put the strongest teams in both countries in one team, right? So therefore under our side we can bring people together. The impact of the fact that people are gonna get hope for Indonesia in the Olympics, even though like before that Indonesia always lose, for example. Now they actually have something that they can hope for. And why is this hope really important then? Because under our side it can bring people together like national wide, right? We can foster cohesion. The fact that people are gonna come together and they're gonna be celebrating the sports industry of Indonesia when it has never really been looked ever before in the first place. But also even in our worst case then, if Indonesia is gonna lose, we say that it's okay because at the very least we already give them hope, which is really important, as that is what drives and like what becomes the motivation for athletes to like surpass their limits, for example, so they can train harder because they believe I actually have a chance in Olympics instead of just keep getting destroyed by big countries like in the past. But also secondly, at the very least, we give them their agency, and because we want to give them the support of like self-actualization, because we tell you, right, the incentive what changes under our side when these vulnerable countries can work together with other countries, they can have a bigger incentive because they think, oh, they have a bigger chance to win. Therefore, their like government is gonna want to like invest even more in the sports industries, and they're gonna give more facilities and more fundings, for example. And this is important because at the very least, if we lose, there is progressivity under our side, and like
onwards, then Indonesia can progress even more. This is the chance that they're not giving under their side. Even if we're gonna be like dependent or like gonna be cared by other people, if like there's like one good athlete that won the Olympics, it's gonna be motivating for other athletes to opt into Olympics and like work even harder. And that's why it is important for their good morale. Even in our worst case, then let's also engage. Then if we lose, we tell you you're still gonna be getting recognition that Jennifer told you. You're gonna get sponsorships. The fact that Indonesia made it to semifinals in Olympics when they're already always losing in pre-elimination, for example. We give them chances in the first place, which is why this agency is something that's important when these countries are like taken away their agency when they're already someone that is like much more favorable in terms of infrastructure or like funding, for example. Practically, at the very least, we can build even more infrastructure for these countries in the process of training for Olympics. But even in the worst case that we lose, then because we feel like we also like can like cut more on money with more efficient funding instead of only one government funding these teams. There's gonna be two countries. This is why it is important for us to empower even more favorable actors. For those reasons, propose.
We thank the second prop for that speech. To continue, we call upon the second opposition speaker. Here.
The problem with with government side is I'm unsure as to why suddenly Argentina, who has Messi and all these other big players like DePaul, will want to pick up an Indonesian player like Marcelino Ferdinand. In this debate, I'm gonna do a few things. First, I'm gonna do an independent rebuttal entirely against DPM case as to why that is entirely relevant, and I'm gonna go to two issues. First, I'm gonna go on the countries, and then second, I'm gonna go on to the players. First, they told us that big countries don't want to collab, and this is incentive like why monopoly will not happen and equality will happen. I have three responses. First, I think this is just wrong in the sense that like sports is very zero sum. You have a winner and you have a loser, and when you're not a gold medalist, then you're a loser, right? Like even if you're a silver medalist, people don't like consider you, and you're still considered that team who lost in the finals. This is precisely why big countries have incentive to do things like collaborate. But second, if they don't opt into this collaboration, this coalition, then they will be the losers because other countries will collab and then beat them. In the sense that like note their response against my POI regarding China. Notably, because China creates these particular coalitions, they're the ones who are gonna win the Olympics, and that is precisely why the US will not. And for those reasons, there's huge incentive for the USA to do things like build coalitions with other big countries and like dominate either way. But third, if we believe their case that these big countries are so strong that somehow they will win either way, then I don't see the delta and the impact on their side of the house, because then it just exists the idea that you have these coalitions anyway, but USA is still going to win. So I'm unclear as to what the impact is on their side of the house. Either they have to go to two options. First, concede that big countries are going to create coalitions and it creates monopoly and creates unfair competition within that particular Olympics, or second, concede that the USA will not do it because they're too strong, and for those reasons domination happens either way. Note that the weighing judge is simple. On either scenario, they lose on the principle of fairness and equality, and for those reasons we think that it's just like principally unjust and particularly like unnecessary. Why you would have these coalitions in the first place when you literally destroy that equality anyway? Logically, if we're going to engage in their best case scenario, then what's going to happen is coalitions can win, and this is why it's going to be a race to the bottom. Your talent pool decreases, and for those particular reasons, like you just don't have fairness within the Olympics. Second, they told us that players have more motivation because, we have a chance to win, and you're going to finally be able to like get that gold medal. First, there's no likelihood analysis as to why this particular player from like a poor country will be picked up anyway. Notably, let's use their mechanism, right? You don't have infrastructure, your country does not care about you, so why would you even be good enough for a country like the USA to pick you up? For those reasons, it is unclear to me as to why a poor country will suddenly get recognition or a particular player will suddenly get recognition for the reason that they don't pass the selection phase in and of itself, because this particular country don't want to collaborate with your small, poor country. Second, like probably even if you do get in, what happens is the attention goes to the other big country. This is the reason why particularly when you have the US Olympics, like big names like LeBron James and Kevin Durant are the ones who get all the attention, whereas even good players in the NBA like Anthony Edwards and Jason Tatum, even though they're particularly great players and MVP caliber players, they get zero attention in the Olympics just for the reason that the big attention and the sponsorships just go to these big players anyway. So it is unclear to me as to why even in the best case scenario that these small countries and these poor athletes suddenly get into the squad itself, that they will get attention and they will get like sponsorships. But third and finally, we're gonna flip. We see it on our side, when you do things like lose, you hold your head high for the reason that you know that this is something that you do for a country, you understand these particular like ideas of national unity, and for those reasons you just have much more pride and dignity when you lose the particular Olympics, because I did it for my country and I have this collective sense of unity. But if you don't play, for example, in like a big team, then they're gonna laugh at you and say, haha, chamat, bench warmer. I'm gonna do a few things in my speech now. First, I'm gonna go to clash on like recognition and equal playing field on countries. I'm first gonna talk about principle. Like simply put, like the Olympics is not a privatized sport where you're trying to get profit. I think it's a way for like countries to come together and like collaborate and set all things apart and just play sports. But even if you don't buy that, I'm gonna give you a few layers of like country analysis. First, I want to be very clear as to the actual incentive of these countries, particularly in the context of Olympics. In this sense, like countries want to get as much medals as possible because simply put, that brings them national pride and a sense of like reputation. Note that countries can do anything in their power to make sure that they get this. Like look at Indonesia, who literally naturalized so many Dutch players. Look at like the basketball player Lester Prosper, who was originally from a different ethnicity but literally pulled in by Indonesia just so they could have a sense to win. But note, on their side of the house, I think poor countries will not collaborate with big countries anyway for a few reasons. First, because the big country has no incentive to do so. They want to win, especially if rival countries, like for example China against the US, form a coalition, they're gonna do the same with other bigger countries. And so your chance of medaling goes away because you need to uniquely try and get the best players. What happens is that the talent pool shrinks, and that's particularly bad because then you have a small amount of players that you're gonna see in the Olympics who have the chance of winning anyway, and any chance of like Indonesia winning just particularly disappears. But third, what then will the country do? I think there are three scenarios here that they have to engage on all prongs. First, either they get great players from good countries with really good players. In the sense that like the USA will pick up Luka Doncic from Slovenia, even though the Slovenia team isn't really good. What happens here is that you don't get in and poor countries don't get in, and even if they try to build a coalition with other, for example, like Southeast Asian countries, that just will not compete against big European countries who literally have the birth lottery of being like 6 feet tall at minimum and having this huge muscle and infrastructure. Second, they try to get every player from the top team, and this is uniquely harmful for the reasons of monopoly and competition that I've already told you previously. But third and finally, even if this player particularly gets on the team, that's just particularly bad because you don't care about that player and you're gonna put him aside. Like you're gonna leave him on the bench, and yes, you get some type of symbolic representation, but uniquely that's not important. Next, I'm gonna talk about athletes, and note this is a very big push starting from their PM speech. First, I think being on a good team does not automatically make you well known for the reason that the team is just so good that you dilute the sense of like talent. In the sense like even though you're such a great player in Indonesia, you probably won't compete with LeBron James. But second, being in an international tournament does not automatically make you well known. On air, they don't show preliminary rounds because uniquely, if the Olympics happens on like the other side of the world, you probably even as an Indonesian say like, oh, I probably won't watch the game because it's at like 12 a.m. at night and like only one of my like Indonesian national players are on the team anyway. This means you like lose buy-in for like attention because you don't have that big collective like identity to watch your country in the Olympics. But even if you don't buy that, I think this is particularly why players like in the Club World Cup don't actually care about clubs like Fluminense or Al Hilal, even though they particularly participate within this international stage for the reason that they lose, right? They don't want to watch losing teams and instead focus on big ones like Chelsea. But third and finally, we're just gonna flip. When you are on your own country, that's just infinitely better on your side of the house. Why? Because you get more attention. In a sense, like this is particularly why Indonesians care about players like Marcus Bolden in NBA, who averages only 2 points, but when you go in the Olympics, he averages 20. And this is because you funnel all of your attention and resources towards this particular player. Note that because of that, you just get more things like sponsorships and funding and attention. But that means the recognition for that particular athlete is just better. In a sense, like not only do you get a star player from your own country representing your own country, but also things like other smaller development players who can learn from this person because they're a role model who feels proximate to them. What is the impact? The impact is that the state cares so much more about you and you developing as a player, because this is the only team where you can go and say that, oh yeah, sponsors are going to be local and I'm going to get attention. Because on the other side of the house, fairness and equality ceases to exist for the very reason of country's incentive. It is too late for them on WIP to engage, because simply put, they're unable to show me why exactly poor countries will be picked up and why big countries will suddenly like pick them up in the first place. For those reasons, it's clear this is an op-win. Thank you so much.
We thank the second opposition speaker for that speech. To continue, we call upon the third proposition speaker. Here.
Side opposition has already lost this debate when they still have not been able to prove to us the burden that my first and second speaker have already given towards opposition, which is why under side opposition, these developing countries and these small countries are still gonna get the chance to be able to compete in the Olympics and to be able to actually win in the Olympics, because we have already told you the fact that right now Olympics is something that is very like unfair, since the countries that are winning is always like the top countries who have like more resources and like more human resources. That's why we say that side opposition cannot win this debate, because they still have not been able to prove and answer the burden that side proposition have been constantly giving towards side opposition. Two clashes in this debate. I'll talk about, firstly about the fair chance of winning, and secondly about the recognition and like fulfillment towards the athletes. First clash then, about fair chance of winning and progressivity. Do notice that the biggest burden that they threw to us, that their second talked about, is about why top room is suddenly going to want to like adopt these like small like countries, for example. We say this is going to, we say that top rooms are like these like semi-good countries are still gonna have the incentive to like go to like these developing countries or like small countries, because obviously this correlation is something that happens mutually. When they know the fact that there's a really good athlete from like these developing countries, for example, someone who is like very good from like these developing countries, these semi-good rooms are still gonna these semi-good like countries are still gonna have the incentive to be able to like go and like want to collaborate with them, because they know that the athlete from like this country can give them benefit. For example, we say that the incentive is still going to be there, because these semi-good countries are gonna want to win. That's why they're gonna want to go to like these developing countries that have like good athletes. But talking about their burden too, about how they try to told us that these top countries are just gonna team up with top countries, we say that this is not true because of two things. Firstly, we say that this is not something that is likely to happen, because the fact that these top countries such as US or etc., they already win like always in like these Olympics, they don't want to share like their ways or like the way that they coach to like other countries. That's why they're not gonna have the incentive, because they simply don't need to, because they already win constantly. They don't have the incentive because they don't need to like collaborate with like other countries. But secondly then, we say that since these countries, we say that because since these countries already have like such a pride in like these like sports, for example, such as US have like a huge pride because they always win like the Olympics, they're not gonna want to share that win. For example, they're not gonna want like people to know and like acknowledge that their win is like because it is shared, for example. That's why these top countries are not gonna have the incentive to like team up with like another like top country. We say that this is not something that is likely, because there's no because these top countries are not gonna have the incentive to like collaborate
collaborate with like other top countries, But even if it, but talking about the last thing, but even if it's true, the fact that these like semi-good countries don't want to like collaborate, we say that it is fine anyway, because at least under our side, when like developing countries want to like collaborate with each other, because they know that like, there's like good athletes from like this country and like good athletes from this country, they cannot win because the fact that US is like too overpowering, but when they collaborate, they can win. This is exactly the benefit that exists under side proposition, because at least under our side, we give them a chance to actually like collaborate, and we give them a chance to actually win and like share their resources. For example, even if they lose, let's engage in their worst case, that the fact that if we lose, it is still gonna be okay at the end of the day, because they're still gonna get the resources and recognition, which I'm going to later engage on in the second clash, in the second clash about fulfillment and like impact towards athletes, why it is going to be something that is good for them. But second clash then about fulfillment and impact towards like these athletes, and why it is actually going to be something good for these athletes. Do notice that the biggest burden that side opposition gives to us is about how this is going to be bad, because it is going to be overshadowing these like athletes, and like there's gonna be athletes that are going to be like carried by other players. Firstly, we say that this is something that is not true, because do notice that the prerequisite for like a country wanting to like collaborate with another country is obviously because it is mutual. The fact that right now, because the fact that there's someone like there's like a good athlete from like a certain country, for example, that's exactly why they're gonna opt out into like collaborating with this country. That's why we don't really understand the analysis on why these athletes are gonna get overshadowed, because firstly, they get the same access towards like these like coaches or like facilities, because when they collaborate, they're obviously gonna have the incentive to become together and like work as a team. That's why we say that the likelihood of like these athletes getting overshadowed is something that is very small, because at the end of the day, these are already good athletes that you're giving more facilities to. We say that the overshadowing is something that is not likely to happen. But and secondly then, athletes will get overshadowed and they're not going to get recognition. Secondly then, we say that these athletes are still going to get recognition. Even in the worst case scenario, the fact that they're being carried by their team, for example, they're still going to get recognition, because at least under our side, even if the recognition is not something that is globally, for example, they're still going to get recognized in like a national team and like between those two countries, because obviously the fact that you are representing your country right now, it is already something that is very amazing. That's why these people are going to recognize you, because even if you lose in like the game, for example, you're still gonna get that recognition, and this is something that happens exclusively under our side. And why is recognition something that is very important? Firstly, we told you the fact that recognition is the prerequisite for you to get like a lot of money, for example, like pragmatic benefits. The fact that when you are recognized by like people, you're gonna get a lot of sponsorships, for example. A lot of people are gonna want to collaborate with you. And secondly then, it is something that is key for like motivation for you to actually keep wanting to like do sports, for example, or motivation for you to like work harder, because you know that you're being recognized by a lot of people. In comparison to our side opposition, when we don't give this platform to like these developing countries, they're not gonna get, firstly, they're not gonna get any like sponsorships or like recognition from a lot of people, and secondly, they're not gonna get any motivation, since they know the fact that I'm not gonna get recognized, and also the fact that under side opposition, the countries that is keep winning is going to be like the US. That's why they're not gonna get any they're not gonna have any motivation to actually like do their best, because they know that the countries that is going to win is only like the US, for example, is still going to be the US. So what's the point of me working hard? I'm still gonna get overshadowed by them, because obviously they have better facilities, they have better coaches than me. That's why this is a harm that exclusively exists under side opposition, and they cannot. And they still have not been able to prove to us on why this motivation is not something that is going to be toxic for these athletes, because we told you the fact when these countries are not able to like collaborate with each other, and the country that is going to be winning is always like these top countries, why these athletes are still gonna get the motivation to like do their best and like reach their potential. That's why comparatively under side opposition, when we give them this ability to like collaborate with like countries, it is going to create a better motivation for like these athletes, since they're gonna know, they're gonna think that, I have a chance to actually win since I'm going with like another country, and also the fact that I have more resources, I have a better coach like teaching me, I'm gonna have a better chance of actually winning. That's why these people are gonna be able to like push into their fullest potential, and actually to push into their fullest potential, because they have that unique motivation that exists under side proposition. And we say that, how do we weigh this then? Firstly, in terms of impact towards the athlete, we say that it is going to be better under side opposition because we have all the benefit of like pragmatic and like all of the motivational impact that exists under side proposition. That's why I'm very proud to propose.
Thank the third prop speaker for that speech. To continue, we call upon the third op speaker. Here.
It's okay? Okay. I still don't understand if proposition wants to say that the teams that are existing right now in these underdog countries are that good or that bad. Because if they're that good, then that means that they're probably capable of trying to win anyway. But if they're that bad, then what is going to be the incentive for countries to want to try to recruit them in the first place? I feel like this entire blurry likelihood of why then are the likelihood for them to win so much more marginally significant in comparison to them just relying on their own organic recognition by the end of the day. I want to be proud of Indonesia, but if half of their soccer team is filled with Dutch expats, then my impression of them is going to be, they're likely carried by these Dutch expats because Dutch people tend to have a bigger stature, a bigger muscular stature, and an advantage in height. Why then should these countries' teams want to prioritize someone like Marcelino Ferdinand, which is disadvantaged in height, when in their coalition, for example, with the Dutch, they can pick someone that's marginally taller, marginally more advantaged, especially in the global league, where you're going to be facing with countries that are going to be in the level of like same biological disadvantage at the end of the day. I only have one point of framing to crystallize this debate. I feel like it's clear that what we want to try to give to you, the inherent spirit in sports is to represent itself as a national identity. And insofar that government side try to present identity in like a coalition, then the parameter of contribution of what exactly makes a country win. For example, you're not going to be able to split just, Indonesia and the Dutch, they're going to split 50-50 on their win, because it's unsure whether they're going to play equally or they're going to prioritize the better player. Therefore, the parameter on their side of the house is still very unclear. But secondly, you're allowing this for every country. And the only way this debate is going to be charitable is if they concede to the idea that coalitions are not just going to be with countries that are developing, but also countries that are already inherently developed in sports. Countries like the USA have one simple mindset. They want to win more medals, they want to win more awards, and they want to be seen as this glory of undefeated and jack of all trades in every single sport that exists, which is exactly why there is much more likelihood for countries like America to actually poach countries. I'll explain this later in my engagements. But secondly, the idea of Olympic sports is that they represent national talent. For example, Indonesia is usually dominating in the badminton scene. Brazil, Portugal, and Argentina dominate the soccer scene. And insofar that this literally define their country's identity, I don't see why in any one of these competing ideas, countries would want, countries or like people who are watching these sports would want to see their best compete and dominate the entirety. The reason why people want to see Messi against Ronaldo is because they're both great players. They don't want to see Messi and Ronaldo go and team up with each other. But then, I'm going to shift the burden. The burden is the debate. It's not trying to develop the sport it's as narrow as trying to develop the sport for these rural underdog countries, but it's trying to perceive what exactly is the mutual interest of every single country that want to make that they don't want to make a coalition or they do. And at the end of the day, and this is to say that the identity of Brazil and Portugal revolve around them winning soccer. So why then would they want to make a coalition with another country? And why then would they want to make? Even if they're recruited by the USA, because of course the USA wants to win and they have enough capital to do so, why then will the spirit of sports be inherently still be interesting at the end of the day? I have 4 points of engagement I'm going to get to on their side of the house. Firstly, their mechanization is still very unclear. We're talking about countries, not individuals. We told you down the bench that contribution cannot be scaled, and therefore they cannot tell us that, oh, these developing countries are actually going to be advertised very well to these semi-good countries. I don't get this for two reasons. One, I feel like the only way for you to actually be able to be recognized by these countries if you actually offer them something good. For example, the reason why Dutch expats actually entered Indonesian team is because PSSI give them a lot of money. And I feel like that's the inherent burden that they have to take, that this is probably going to be a transactional exchange by the end of the day. But second, when they say that powerful countries have no incentive because they already win anyway, no, a lot of countries seek glory at the end of the day, right? So the thing is, bad competition is actually much marginally more contingent on their side of the house. But thirdly, they said that we cannot prove that why underdog countries will not be good on their side of the house. I feel like I have 2 points of weighing to this. One, I feel like in the likelihood that our side actually can win and improve, which is happening right now, of course, Indonesia lost in the qualifiers again, but here's the thing. When Indonesia won against a major country once, their recognition is filled with support. Their recognition is filled with positive affirmation that they're actually doing amazing, and they're happy to see that they make it to the qualifiers, even though they lost to Japan or something. But the thing is, on their side of the house, that organic recognition cannot exist. Why? Because you take away that entire pride that these players have, these star players have in Indonesia at the end of the day. The comparative is quite simple. On their side of the house, they're going to want to prioritize the star players because at the end of the day, the goal of sports is to win. You want to be recognized. Therefore, you want to prioritize the strongest, the biggest, and the most powerful people that exist at the end of the day. But fourthly, they try to give us this blurry mechanization on motivation. I feel like motivation is going to be mutual, but better on our side of the house when Indonesia are motivated by the entirety of Indonesians going to their TVs, watching their qualifier match, even though they're outmatched. And I feel like that motivation on their solo is outweighs significantly if they are going to be like collaborating with the Dutch, where the support is going to be far more segmented because one, they're likely not going to be as much. There's likely not going to be as much players inside of their team at the end of the day. Yes.
For Indonesia, the sports is already established, like for football. What about developing countries that have no access for it inherently?
I don't think then they won't have the incentive to play that sport in the first place. Have you ever seen Fiji play soccer? I don't think they want to play soccer in the first place. And thirdly, I feel like there's always going to be a matter of national identity at the end of the day, right? I feel like the only way for this to be charitable is if they approve that all these countries actually have the interest to like develop this particular sport. I feel like the only way to say that is if and only if these countries actually are already partially established in the sports. For example, Indonesia wanting to establish them further in soccer. But when you talk about countries like Fiji or like Barbuda, they don't really care about soccer. They're more into rugby. They're more into their own local sport. I feel like their analysis does not make sense at the end of the day. But thirdly, I'm going to explain to you about the comparison between bad competition. Firstly, poaching costs capital. And our side of the house, we've proven to you why it's likely. And the competition for competing is going to be between more countries trying to get the best leverage on their teams of coalitions. For example, USA and Argentina, or like China or China trying to get Argentina. Therefore, we only prove to you that the only likelihood for this to happen is if and only if you're going to be able to, if and only if their mechanism actually says that this is, if and only if their mechanism is charitable to our side of the house, which is to be with capital. At the end of the day, the principle of the debate is simple. It's the fact that at an international scale, you're only going to be recognized if you win organically. You're never going to be recognized if you're going to be overshadowed by people that outweigh you in every single way oppose.
We thank the third opposition speaker for that speech. That wraps up the substantive speakers. To start the reply speakers, we call upon the opposition reply. Here.
A lot of propositions arguments are not a positive case, it is a negative one. So I'm unclear as to what benefit happens on their side of the house. Precisely with Abhiyan's callouts about the mechanism and like the inability for us to understand like likelihood is exactly why we win the debate. I'm gonna do a few things. First, I'm just gonna go on like the argument on fairness because I think this has been the biggest contention on both sides of the house. At best, proposition's argument on fairness and equality is a deadlock because on either side of the house, like in status quo, right, like bad countries won't be able to win the Olympics anyway, right? But note, a negotiation, like when you want to create a contract for this particular coalition, is going to go both ways. So a country who has nothing to offer won't get a coalition contract anyway on their side of the house, right? On our side, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bite the bullet. From Kalika's speech until Abhiyan's speech, we have already told you how particularly bad countries don't win, but it's okay because the fact is that more Indonesians, like youth players, can get into Timnas in and of itself is a win. On their side, here's the wing, right? Taking their very best case, and I'm being very charitable here. One Indonesian player gets into like a coalition with the US team because somehow this Indonesian is like so good and so strong and so tall that they're able to compete with the likes of Kevin Durant and LeBron James. But then what happens is, precisely because they don't have the particular experience in Indonesia in comparison to that of the NBA, they're going to sit on the bench and become a cheerleader and clapping for these particular players. Note that this impact is very small in scale and very speculative at best. On our side, here is the wing judge. Insofar as you bring like a team towards the Olympic in and of itself, you get things like 22 Indonesians on a football team, 15 Indonesians on a basketball team. So on scale first, we win. In this sense, like quantitatively, we just get more players and more Indonesians representing that particular country within the international scale. And we think this is good for things like national unity, sponsorship, funding, precisely because you have more representation on the global scale. You don't just like dilute it all onto one player, like who's a ride or die, who it's unclear as to whether or not he's even gonna play in the game or play in the finals when everybody is watching, because it's super competitive and it's unsure as to why his skill is gonna be that good. But second is going to be on like second is going to be on likelihood, because insofar as Indonesia like somehow doesn't have a scandal that bans them from the Olympics, then they're probably going to bring a team. Whereas on their side of the house, it's contingent on things like contracts. It's contingent on things like negotiations, which are shaky and very speculative at best for all of the incentives that we have told you, and why countries would not probably take like a poor country's players precisely for the lack of infrastructure and lack of skill that they themselves have mechanized within this debate. So it's clear that the weighing here is we win on skill and we win on likelihood. But I'm also gonna take out their argument on like, I'm gonna like clearly weigh the argument on things like players. In a sense, like just by incentive analysis, like countries have clear incentive, which is build my reputation, win more, win gold medals, and get more fame. This is precisely what happens in countries like the USA, who literally like have Noah Lyles compete at every single running event and every single track event, precisely because they know that he's the best player and he's going to like win all of the track events anyway. But uniquely, when a country creates a coalition, others are gonna follow, especially if they're big ones. Note that because of the incentive analysis that we've told you, most likely these are going to be like at best like semi-good countries who probably have like a good player but a weak supporting background, right? And for those reasons, probably what's gonna happen is that these good countries who are already naturally good and have a lot of capital, like those in Europe who have big investment on things like sports, they're probably gonna be the ones winning anyway. And so you don't have things like derbies between Indonesia and Singapore, derbies between Malaysia and Singapore, and all these different types of regional things, because simply put, you don't have a national team that you bring towards the Olympics simply because like you don't care, and players are disincentivized and they're discouraged because even if I play, then I'm gonna lose towards America and his big coalition bloc anyway. Note that because of this, player recognition is better on our side of the house for reasons that we have told about things like media, things like sponsorship, and things like funneling all of your money and resources towards this particular player. And because of that, we do things like create better youth and better like sports in and of itself. So funding increases on skill on our side of the house. Uniquely, this is exactly why I'm proud to be Indonesian and still watch their Timnas games even when they lose. Thank you.
We thank the op reply for that speech. To conclude the debate as a whole, we call upon the prop reply. Hear, hear.
opposition's premise is weird. They only play in the instance where big players will only work together with big players. When we told you that the reason that what is more feasible is when these smaller countries will be able to work together, and we give them that chance in the first place. Notice that they only generalize that these smaller countries, they say that they're not gonna have that interest in the first place. When we tell you that the reason they do that is because they're constantly undermined and like demotivated because they're always like beat by these big countries in Olympics because they're not given the chance in the first place. At the very least, we give them the choice for them to actualize and like have more efficient funding, for example, because we give them the allowance in these policies. This is what that is important. We want to protect those who actually still have the motivation to thrive, but they don't really have the infrastructure to support it. But two issues then. Firstly, regarding in the macro country, macro country impact, but also secondly, a more micro in the athletes. Firstly, in the like big grand scheme in like countries, they tell you that there's gonna be a monopolization of power where big countries will only collide with bigger countries, and like smaller ones will be even more discriminated. But firstly, we question the likelihood of this when we already told you the clear analysis then, if their interest is they are hungry for power and hungry for medal, then they wouldn't want to work together with smaller countries. We concede to that, we concede to the premise, but we tell you that their goal on our side is we give them the chance for these smaller countries to work together in the first place. We have never told you that we want to work together with USA, for example. But if we're talking about big on big, then there's for several reasons why this won't happen under our side. Firstly, they already have the capability to thrive within themselves, so therefore there's no incentive in the first place for, like, for example, USA to work together with other bigger countries, which can spark geopolitical tension. I feel like exactly that is the deterrent as to why these countries wouldn't be that reckless. But also secondly, they wouldn't want to share their resources or infrastructure or strategy, for example, with these other countries, because it will just open up their country to becoming someone that's more vulnerable, especially we're talking about the context in which Olympic is something that is competitive and rivalry, right? But also thirdly, even if they work together with these big countries, then if they win, it's only going to be undermining the sovereignty and the capability of their own country, because you're going to be working together USA and Argentina, and people are going to be questioning why is USA working together with Argentina when they already have the capability in the first place. So exactly then, because these are only extreme cases, we tell you that proposition is more charitable in this clash. We tell you that it is much more feasible and realistic when small countries want to work together in small countries. But even in the case where small countries will get monopolized and discriminated, we tell you in the second clash later why we still gain a net benefit. Under our side, when these small countries will get the access, then we tell you that firstly they're gonna have more support for funding, because instead of only funding two separate teams, for example, they can work together into funding into one, because there are already people who are limited in the resources, and their economical cycle is unstable, right? This is why under our side the benefit is there's gonna be more incentive, because they have more hope. So I can compete with bigger countries, even if Indonesia work together with Malaysia, as opposed if they were only competing individually, right? So the government will pay attention to the infrastructure in the sport, for example, even more funding and even more infrastructure built. And this is important because we give this progressivity, as that means under our side there's still going to be a delta. Even if they lose in the process of them preparing for Olympics, there's still going to be more money and more better welfare for these athletes under our side. And at least we have that hope, and that we have the hope and that chance for us to believe that we have a chance. This is what is the prerequisite for the athletes to work together and work past their limits. It is not able under their side. So how do you weigh this then? Under our side, we give the agency for vulnerable countries to actually gain leverage and have fairness in Olympics, and we say that is the spirit of sports that we should protect under our side. And also regarding progressivity, at least in the worst case, we still have more infrastructure rather than only being on our own. But secondly, regarding athletes, strictly engaging to our worst case, then even if we're gonna be overshadowed by bigger countries, at the very least these countries are gonna even only it's only one athlete for Indonesia, for example, at least these athletes gonna get experience, and people are gonna recognize this, because you can see even if it's overshadowed, you can see Carmen from Hearts to Hearts, they're still supported by Indonesia, even though the Korean members are much more in the spotlight, right? Therefore it will bring this together communal with people. Therefore, for those reasons, proud to propose.
We thank the prop reply for that speech, and that concludes the second round of the day. Virtually cross floors and shake hands, and you can then wait outside until it's time for the oral adjudication. Can I also request the live stream is cut? Udah ya? Udah mati ya?
Welcome to Yogyakarta, the city of students. The city where a significant number of public and private schools and universities are located. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta, a private university established on September 27, 1965 by Yayasan Selamat Riyadi Yogyakarta.
Dalam bahasa Sanskerta, Atma berarti jiwa dan Jaya berarti unggul. Sehingga Atmajaya berarti jiwa yang unggul. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta juga memiliki semboyan dalam bahasa Latin Serviens in Lumine Veritatis yang artinya melayani dalam cahaya kebenaran.
The four core values upheld by UAJY are excellence, inclusivity, humanism, and integrity. Excellence implies a quality or being better than others. Inclusivity means encompassing all social groups. Humanism, the definition, means to serve the common interest of fellow humans. Integrity means adherence to the moral and ethical principles, honesty, reliability, consistency in words and acts, and a sense of responsibility. UAJY supports diverse values, cultures, religions, races, ethnicities, and languages as a university with students from all across Indonesia. UAJY's diversity is an asset for further collaboration and synergy in preparing for a better future.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki 4 kampus yang terbagi menjadi Kampus 1, Gedung Santo Alfonsus. Kampus 2, Gedung Santo Thomas Aquinas. Kampus 3, Gedung Santo Bonaventura. Dan Kampus 4, Gedung Bunda Teresa. Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta memiliki fakultas dengan berbagai program studi sarjana, program studi magister, dan international undergraduate program.
Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta is the second home for every individual to develop and share information, and a university with a high-quality education to attain unlimited aspirations and accomplishments. To achieve the goals, UAJY provides classrooms with a hybrid learning system, laboratories in each faculty as a room to explore, co-working space as a discussion room, medical personnel who are always available in the university clinic room, and a library that provide books, e-books, and digital libraries to open a wide window onto the world in various ways.
UAJY selalu konsisten memberikan pelayanan yang didasari rasa solidaritas kepada sesama. Selama saya bekerja di UAJY, saya merasakan kekeluargaan yang sangat kuat menjadi dasar bagi seluruh sivitas akademika.
UAJY endeavors to develop graduates who are ethical, creative, innovative, adaptive, transformational, collaborative, and benevolent. All these are aimed to help students achieve their future dreams.
Mendidik itu mengajarkan ilmu pengetahuan dan berbela rasa serta berkontribusi pada kesejahteraan masyarakat. Hal tersebut menjadi landasan fundamental bagi Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta untuk mencetak generasi muda yang unggul di bidangnya dan memiliki integritas moral yang tinggi. Saya bangga menjadi bagian dari Universitas Atmajaya Yogyakarta. FIFA UAJY, kami bangga ada di sini.